Yo, what's going on everybody, and welcome to another episode of Kouki Cutters. In today's episode, we are taking apart the $100 2JZ. So a little backstory as to why this video is happening. I am building a 1.5 JZ for the IS300. Now the IS300 is full on project car now. I'm getting everything prepped and ready. So the cylinder head is coming along. Now I just need a bottom end. So we're gonna tear this apart, and my only interest is the block, the crank, the oil pan. Everything else on this I really don't care about. Now I did pick this up for $100 off of OfferUp, so 2JZs are out there, but as a machinist, you know, I saw the opportunity. This thing has supposedly low compression, so we're gonna find out what exactly happened, and we're gonna go from there. So enjoy. So first things first, you should always drain the oil before you start working on an engine. Now this thing's been sitting for about a year now, and the drain plug was loose, so I'm assuming there's no oil, and I was right. Probably like one small tiny little drop of oil, but yeah, you always want to make sure that, you know, it's empty and there's no coolant in it, because if there is, then it's just gonna make a huge mess and it's not gonna be fun. So, but yeah, now that we know it's empty, time to move on to the head. Before we can even remove the head, before we can take off any of the covers, the lower manifold's gonna have to come off, the bracket, the motor mount, all of this stuff is gonna have to come off. Like I said, none of this matters because there's gonna be a 1JZ GTE head sitting on here later on in the future, so let's get to it. Alright, now we can move on to the front covers. So the front cover has 1, 2, looks like 3 Allen head bolts that are obviously missing, so take those off and then the top cover comes off. So the next thing to do would be to remove the tensioner so we can gain access to the bottom cover. I'm going to use a 12mm socket, zap those off, bam, bam, bam. Alright, that comes off easy. Alright, so as I was loosening the bolts that are back here for the front cover, I noticed this. That is a heat tab for warranty. That means that this engine has actually been rebuilt already. So instead of focusing on taking all of this stuff off, I'm just going to go straight into removing the head. And in order to remove the VVTi gear, this has to come off first, so I'm going to zap that off, which exposes our Allen that we need. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to hammer it in. Like I said, this thing's been rebuilt, so it totally fell. Hammer it in, zap it off. Ready? Here we go. Alright, well, at least these things are off now. I'm not going to get into the condition of the cylinder head just because obviously I'm not going to be using the cylinder head, so but I will say this, because it was rebuilt, the cams, they looked fine, the journals were fine, the lobes looked perfect, none of them were going flat, so the overall condition of the head was actually pretty good. One thing though that you will notice is that I am beating on the socket for the head bolts. Now that is because a couple of them were actually rounded, so whoever rebuilt this engine, they either didn't have the proper tool to torque the head bolts down, or they were just guesstimating and they ended up rounding off the head bolts. But in the end, got them out and everything went smoothly. So now that the head bolts are out, the only thing left to do in order to remove the head would be to unscrew these two that hold the water neck from the water pump. Take those off real quick. Quick that. There we go. And the head is free. Right. There's the front. Here's the back. Oh yeah! Crap. Okay, so upon removing the head, we are inspecting all of the cylinders since the block is what I'm after, and as I mentioned earlier, they were selling this motor because it had low compression. So we found the culprit. Bum bum ba-dum. It's a melted cylinder. Melted piston. If you guys can see, there's a piece of the piston missing right there. There's detonation marks everywhere, especially right here. There's actually a chunk missing right there, and it looks like it just, you know, that piece of aluminum just melted into the cylinder right here. So yeah, this is not good. I mean, if I'm boring them 20 over, it doesn't matter, right? Because I do have another block, I do have another crank, but I was hoping it was just going to be a blown head gasket, but it's not. Like I said though, it's not a big deal. It's going to get machined over, oversized either way. So if I don't use this block, at least hopefully the crank is good, so I can use the crank out of this block, and then I can use the spare other block that I have sitting in my backyard. So yeah, let's continue with this. So now that the head is off, we're going to remove the oil pan, and we're going to see how the rods look, how the crank looks, and we're going to get this damn front pulley off. Oh yeah. So first to look inside, there's no metal shavings, so that's good. The oil pickup looks good, everything looks decent. So yeah, time to remove all of this stuff, and then we'll remove the main oil pan, and we'll take our first look into the crank, rods, and pistons. Cool stuff. So the crank actually looks really good. At least from here it does. Don't feel any rod knock on the cylinder, that's all melted down. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna remove all the perimeter bolts and then see what's waiting for us under all of this stuff. Happy because I don't have to take it off the stand. Just wedge it out. Bam! It's off. Now that we're here, we can start to even try to remove this damn bolt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wedge something in between the cranks so it doesn't spin. where it spins that way, so that we can get enough leverage on this bolt and pull it out. So there we go. Bam! There we go. Came off nice and easy. Like I said, I'm not going to be using this damper solely because I'm probably going to use an ATI. So I can beat the crap out of it and not worry about it. There it is. Pull these out, and now we can take off the oil pan, or should I say oil pump. Take off the oil pump. First things first, the front cover. You have the front cover, you can take off the belt guide. And finally, the timing belt itself. Alright, so this thing has tie-hole bearings in it, so that means this thing was rebuilt. So I'm really hoping that this crank hasn't been ground, hasn't been, you know, cut in any sort of way. Hoping that the rods are standard, mains are standards. From the looks of it, I can't really get an answer on that based off of the bearing number, but yeah, it looks like the actual bearings were coated, so whoever rebuilt this, they did a smart move by coating the bearing surfaces. So, because I know tie hoses don't come coated like this. I don't know if you guys can see. It's like a grayish metallic looking coating on there. It's meant to help with heat and friction. So yeah, whoever rebuilt this, they did a good job. They made a good call on these bearings. Now, the fun part, taking these out. Like I said, I'm not keeping these rods, I'm not keeping these pistons. These are GE NA pistons and rods, so they're a lot weaker than the GTE stuff. As you guys can clearly tell how thin it is right here, so I'm not going to be keeping these rods, I'm not going to be keeping these pistons. These can all go in the trash, the scrap bin. It looks like the pistons are OEM. Can't really tell, you know, because there's so much carbon buildup on these. But it looks like they are OEM. Alright, pistons and rods are out. Time to get the oil pump and this gear out so we can pull the mains off and pull the crank. Looks like all of the bolts are out. Now we can pry this thing off. I know the gear's on here, but I'm using the oil pump to pry the gear off because I cannot pull this damn gear off by itself. So I'm using the oil pump to pry this thing off. For now, I think we're just gonna leave this gear on because I'm gonna have to probably put it in the press and then just press this thing off. I really don't want to damage this gear because it has the reluctor on it for the sensor. And that is the reason why I'm going with the NA2J for the 1.5JZ because it has the crank trigger, so I really want this gear. I don't want it to break. We all know how easy these little teeth fall off, so we're gonna leave it at that, and we're just gonna pull the crank out with the oil pump still on it. Alright, time to take off the mains. Let's do this. Oh, yes. Yes. Okay. So it looks like these mains are actually in perfect condition, which is exactly what I wanted. As I mentioned, I really don't care about the head that much. I don't care about the pistons. I don't care about the rods. The only thing that I care about now, seeing that one of those pistons is melted down, is the condition of the crank. Let's pull this out. There we go. Whew. And there we have it. Let's see, yeah, none of these rods are gone. Oh, except for the first one. The first one's gone. The first journal is gone. It's all the way down to the copper. But it looks like I said, these bearings were actually coated, so but look at that, it just drops right in. Like, these at least have some spring tension on them still. See that? Let's see, what are they? Oh, these are Federal Moguls. So they used Federal Moguls for the mains and Taihos for the rods. Let's see. Doesn't say anything about an oversized or an undersized. It doesn't even say if it's standard or not, so I could probably punch this part number in and see what it is. But yeah, the crank looks good. Everything looks good except for this number one. This number one has me worried a bit. There's nothing on the crank to indicate that it's, you know, worn out. It looks like the bearing took the entire hit, so I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm gonna check the cap. Yeah, this thing is peeling. Wow. Check the cap. And as you can see, the bearing looks like it's in very good condition. I don't know what the hell's wrong with this bearing. When you compare them, I don't know, that's kind of weird. Anyways, so the 2JZ is apart. Now, I know I didn't go too much into detail, you know, as far as inspecting everything, inspecting the head, checking to see if everything was good. Now, the only thing I really cared about, like I mentioned, was the block and the crank. So, I mean, I did look at that, and the number one cylinder is, you know, it melted down. So, I'm a little bit worried about it, but not too much. It is gonna get oversized pistons. So, we're taking everything to the machine shop tomorrow. We're gonna take this block, the crank that came out of this, and I have a spare block and crank in the backyard, so I'm gonna be taking those as well. And we're gonna see which ones we're gonna be using for this build. But yeah, as for this video, I'm gonna end it here. If you guys are interested in seeing what's to come of the 1.5JZ, then you guys already know, subscribe. And yeah, just keep an eye out for those videos. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. Oh shit. Scared the crap out of me.